Have you ever stood at the edge of an ancient forest as twilight bleeds across the sky and felt the profound weight of its silence? Have you ever heard, in the groaning of ice upon a frozen lake or the sigh of wind through desolate moorland, a voice that is not of our time, a whisper from the deep, cold earth? These sensations are not mere fancies. They are echoes of an ancestral memory, a truth that civilization has tried and failed to pave over and forget. For in the shadows of our world, in the folklore we dismiss as simple tales, lie the great and terrible truths of our shared human experience. These legends are the psychic geology of our species, strata of fear and wisdom laid down over millennia. They are not stories, they are diagnostics. They are the cautionary archives of what happens when we transgress against nature, against community, against the fragile boundaries of our own sanity. The creatures that inhabit these tales, these phantoms and specters, these guardians and avengers, are not mere monsters. They are living symbols, embodiments of forces we have long struggled to comprehend. The insatiable hunger of greed, the corrosive power of grief, the unyielding justice of a wounded earth, and the cosmic dread of what lies waiting just beyond the firelight. I am your guide on this excursion into the gloaming. It is my purpose to navigate these shadowed territories, to hold a lamp to the inscriptions on these ancient tombs of thought, and to translate the chilling whispers that rise from them. Together, we shall venture into a realm where the veil between worlds is thin, and the past is not dead, but merely dormant, awaiting its moment to rise again and remind us of the old laws that still govern the dark. Consider this a journey, not of miles, but of fathoms. We are about to plunge into the abyssal depths of collective memory, to confront the entities that have haunted humanity since the first fire was kindled against the vast and indifferent night. We will not merely recount their tales. We will dissect their meaning. For within their terrifying forms are the keys to understanding our own deepest anxieties and our most profound connections to the world we inhabit. We shall explore 7 such legends, 7 formidable pillars of folklore drawn from across the globe. Each is a unique window into the soul of a culture, a distinct nightmare born of a specific landscape and history. We will travel from the snow-shrouded forests of the North American continent to the mist-wreathed lochs of Scandinavia, from the haunted riverbanks of the New World to the ancient ghettos of old Europe and beyond. Be warned, however, these are not tales spun for children's entertainment, nor are they relics to be handled lightly. They are potent, they are resonant, and they carry the weight of ages. They are collective nightmares that reveal truths, and some truths, once seen, cannot be unseen. They demand our respect, for they have survived the ages for a reason. They are the immortal custodians of forgotten wisdom. If you, like me, feel drawn to the darkness not for its own sake, but for the profound truths it illuminates, then you have found a sanctuary here. This is a communion for those who seek to understand the shadows, to learn their language, and to appreciate the vital lessons they teach. To ensure you do not miss our future explorations into the arcane and the profound, I invite you to subscribe to our channel and to activate the notifications so that you may be alerted when next we venture into the twilight. As we proceed, I ask that you consider which of these entities resonates most deeply within you. Which one awakens a primal fear, a flicker of recognition in the oldest part of your mind? Leave your thoughts in the comments below, for in sharing our unease, we may better understand its source and its significance. This is not merely a channel. It is a colloquium of curious souls, and your insights are a vital part of our shared inquiry. And now, with the formalities observed and the warnings given, let our journey into the heart of legend truly begin. Our first subject emerges from the vast, silent, and unforgiving wilderness of the North American continent, specifically from the lore of the Algonquian peoples. It is a name whispered with a unique and terrible reverence, a name that carries the biting chill of the winter wind and the gnawing ache of starvation. We speak of the Wendigo. This entity is far more than a simple backwoods monster. It is a psychic contagion, a horrifying metamorphosis born of humanity's most desperate taboo. It represents a hunger so profound, so absolute, that it consumes not only the flesh, but the soul itself, leaving behind an eternal, ravenous void. Its primary motivation is an insatiable appetite that can never be sated, a spiritual black hole that seeks to draw all life, warmth, and community into its freezing emptiness. To picture the Wendigo is to conjure an image of profound contradiction and horror. It is often described as a towering, emaciated giant, its form skeletal and gaunt, yet possessing a terrifying, unnatural strength. Its skin is the color of ash or bruised, decaying flesh, stretched taut over bones that seem to jut out at sharp, impossible angles. Its eyes are a focal point of its terror, sometimes described as pushed back deep into their sockets, glowing with a cold, malevolent luminescence like embers in a dying fire. Its mouth is a lipless gash filled with jagged teeth, and its tongue is long and serpentine. Perhaps most chillingly, it is said to exude a palpable aura of cold, a supernatural winter that follows it, and to reek of decay and the grave. It is a being stripped of all human warmth, a walking personification of famine, its very heart a shard of solid ice. Its powers are as dreadful as its form. The Wendigo is unnaturally fast and strong, capable of moving silently through the dense forest despite its size. It is a master of mimicry, able to perfectly imitate human voices, often luring victims by crying for help in the voice of a loved one. Its greatest weapon, however, is psychological. The mere presence of a Wendigo can induce a state of profound paranoia and madness, a condition known as Wendigo psychosis, where the victim becomes consumed by an obsessive craving for human flesh, effectively becoming a vessel for the entity's spirit. Its only true weakness is fire, the symbol of hearth, home, and humanity, the very things its existence negates. The origin of a Wendigo is a tale of ultimate transgression. It is not a creature born of nature, but one made by a terrible human choice. According to the lore, a Wendigo is created when a human being, facing starvation during a harsh winter, breaks the ultimate taboo and resorts to cannibalism. This act of consuming another's flesh to survive is seen as a catastrophic spiritual failure, a surrender to the most primal, selfish instincts. In that moment of sacrilege, the individual's soul is shattered, and a malevolent, cannibalistic spirit of the wilderness, the spirit of the Wendigo itself, rushes in to fill the void. The person is transformed, their humanity burned away by the cold fire of their monstrous new hunger. They become an eternal echo of their own worst moment, cursed to wander the frozen wastes, forever craving what can never satisfy them. Let us cast our minds back to the winter of 1788 to the vast, untamed territories north of the Great Lakes. A French-Canadian fur trapper named Jean-Baptiste Laurent, a man known for his avarice as much as for his skill, had established a solitary trapping line deep in Cree territory. He was a man who saw the wilderness not as a living entity to be respected, but as a treasury to be plundered. He had dismissed the local Cree guides who had worked with him, cheating them of their fair share of the profits, and deciding to winter alone, confident in his own abilities and the vast stores of salted meat and flour he had hoarded in his small, sturdy cabin. That winter, however, was unlike any in living memory. The snows began in late autumn and did not cease, burying the world in a silent, white shroud. The temperature plummeted to depths that could freeze a man's breath in his chest. Trapped and utterly isolated, Laurent watched his meticulously rationed supplies begin to dwindle with alarming speed. The game he relied upon had vanished, either frozen in their burrows or having fled to more sheltered lands. His arrogance curdled into a gnawing fear. One day, a desperate, half-frozen hunter from a nearby Cree band stumbled upon his cabin, begging for shelter and a small portion of food. Laurent, seeing the man as a threat to his own survival, turned him away with a curse, sending him back into the blizzard to die. Weeks later, with his own supplies nearly gone and his mind frayed by hunger and solitude, Loran found the man's frozen body. In a final, terrible act of self-preservation, he committed the unspeakable. He survived. But the man who emerged from the cabin when the spring thaw finally came was not Jean-Baptiste Loran. He was taller, impossibly gaunt, and his eyes burned with a cold, new light. The first travelers to reach the area found the cabin in disarray, its heavy wooden door torn from its hinges. Inside, they found human bones, gnawed clean, and a strange, sickening odor of rot. Of Loran, there was no sign, but leading away from the cabin and into the dark woods was a single set of tracks. They were humanoid, but the stride was unnaturally long, and the impressions in the mud were deeper than any man could make. For generations afterward, that stretch of forest was known as a place of profound dread, a place where lone travelers would hear their names whispered on the wind, and from which some would never return. The Wendigo is a profoundly sophisticated psychological and sociological metaphor. On the most immediate level, it is a stark warning against the horrors of starvation and the moral collapse that can accompany extreme desperation. It codifies the ultimate social taboo, cannibalism, as an act that irrevocably severs one from the human community, transforming them into a monster. But its symbolism runs far deeper. The Wendigo is the personification of insatiable greed and consumption. Its eternal, gnawing hunger is a perfect allegory for the corrosive nature of avarice, whether for food, wealth, or power. The trapper Loran was not merely hungry for food. He was hungry for profit, a hunger that led him to isolate himself and reject community, the very acts that made him vulnerable to the Wendigo spirit. In this, the legend becomes a powerful critique of individualism untempered by communal responsibility. The creature's heart of ice symbolizes the death of empathy, the chilling of the soul that occurs when one's own desires become the only thing that matters. It is the spirit of taking without giving back, of consuming without ever being satisfied. The chilling relevance of the Wendigo has not faded with the advent of the modern world. Rather, it has grown more potent. The legend serves as a powerful environmental metaphor, a critique of a modern consumer culture that, like the Wendigo, consumes the Earth's resources at an unsustainable and ravenous pace. The concept of a Wendigo economy has been used by indigenous activists and scholars to describe a system predicated on infinite growth on a finite planet, a system that, in its endless pursuit of profit, devours communities, ecosystems, and ultimately itself. In an age of climate change and mass extinction driven by human activity, the Wendigo is no longer just a creature of the frozen north. It is the animating spirit of a global crisis. It is the ghost in the machine of industrial civilization, a reminder that a culture of endless wanting will inevitably lead to a spiritual winter, leaving behind a desolate and barren world. The psychosis it induces is the madness of believing that we can consume our way to happiness, a delusion that isolates us from each other and from the natural world upon which we depend. Thus, the Wendigo endures not as a creature of flesh and bone, but as a timeless principle. It is the darkness that waits at the far edge of human desperation and at the greedy heart of our own desires. It teaches us that the most terrifying monsters are not those that hunt us from without, but the insatiable voids we can create within ourselves, and that the true antidote to its chilling call is the warmth of community and the wisdom of knowing what is enough. From the frozen forests of a new world, we travel now to the cold, dark waters of the old. Our journey takes us to Scandinavia, to the placid surfaces of its deep lakes and the churning currents of its rivers, where a far more seductive, yet equally lethal, entity is said to dwell. This is the realm of the Naken, or the Nyx. Unlike the brute force of the Wendigo, the Naken's danger lies in its insidious beauty and its mastery of illusion. It is a creature of deep water and deeper melancholy, a shape-shifting spirit whose primary motivation is a lonely, possessive hunger for companionship, a desire it seeks to fulfill by luring the unwary to a watery grave. It is the embodiment of nature's deceptive allure, the beautiful, shimmering surface that conceals a cold, lightless, and inescapable depth. The Nakin is a master of disguise, its true form rarely seen and subject to varied descriptions. Most commonly, it is said to appear as a handsome young man, often sitting on the riverbank playing an enchanted violin or harp. His music is described as being of an unearthly beauty, filled with a sorrow so profound and a longing so sweet that it bypasses all reason and speaks directly to the soul of the listener, compelling them to draw closer. In other tales, it takes the form of a magnificent white horse, bridled and saddled, patiently waiting by the water's edge, inviting a weary traveler to ride. Yet another of its forms is that of a simple, beautiful water lily or a piece of gleaming treasure submerged in the shallows. These are all traps. Its true form, glimpsed only in the moment of its attack, is said to be a grotesque horror, a being of matted green hair like seaweed, with a gaping mouth of needle-sharp teeth and eyes that hold the cold emptiness of the abyss. Its primary power is its enchanted music, an irresistible siren song that can mesmerize humans and animals alike. It also possesses the ability to control the water, creating treacherous currents and whirlpools to drag its victims down. Its great weakness lies in its name. If a victim can call out its true name, the Nakin's power over them is broken, and it is forced to retreat. The origin of the Nakin is tied to the ancient, pre-Christian reverence for and fear of water. In Norse folklore, water was a liminal space, a gateway between the world of the living and other realms. The Nakin is an elemental spirit, a personification of the water's soul, its life-giving properties, its sudden, unpredictable violence, and its profound, unknowable depths. It is not born in the way a mortal is. It is simply part of the landscape, as ancient and as enduring as the rivers and lakes it inhabits. Some tales suggest it is a fallen spirit, condemned to the water and filled with a bitter loneliness, forever seeking to steal the warmth of human life that it can never possess itself. This tragic dimension adds a layer of complexity to the creature. It is not purely evil, but a being driven by a desperate, sorrowful hunger for connection. Let us turn our attention to a specific fjord in western Norway. In the late 17th century, a time when old beliefs still held powerful sway over the lives of the isolated farming communities. There lived a young woman named Ylera, renowned throughout the valley for her beauty and, more notably, for her restless and romantic heart. She felt constrained by the harsh realities of farm life and yearned for a world of music, poetry, and passion that she had only read about in forbidden books. One midsummer's eve, a time of powerful magic, she wandered away from the village bonfire and down to the edge of the fjord, where the water lay like a sheet of polished obsidian under the lingering twilight. It was then that she heard it, a violin melody of such exquisite sadness and beauty that it seemed to pull at the very strings of her soul. On a rocky outcrop, she saw him, a young man with hair the color of moonlight and eyes that seemed to reflect the sorrow of the sea. He did not speak, but simply played, and the music told a story of profound loneliness and a desperate longing for a kindred spirit. Ylera was utterly captivated. Night after night, she stole away to meet him, falling deeper under the spell of his music and his melancholic gaze. Her family and the village elders warned her, speaking of the Nakin, the spirit of the fjord. They told her the man was an illusion. But Ylera, convinced she had found the soulmate she had always dreamed of, dismissed their words as the superstitions of dull and fearful minds. One evening, the musician finally spoke, his voice as mesmerizing as his music. He told her he was a prince from a kingdom beneath the waves and begged her to join him, to be his queen and live forever in a world of beauty and song. He extended a hand to her. As she took it, the handsome visage melted away. His skin became cold and slimy, his fingers webbing and growing claws that gripped her wrist like iron. His beautiful face contorted into a monstrous horror of green weeds and black teeth. The enchanted music became a discordant shriek as a whirlpool opened in the still water at their feet. Alara screamed, but it was too late. She was dragged beneath the surface into the cold, silent darkness. The only evidence of her fate was a single, silver ribbon from her hair, found the next morning floating amongst the water lilies near the shore. For years afterward, on Midsummer's Eve, villagers claimed they could hear the faint, sorrowful strains of a violin, now accompanied by the sound of a woman's weeping, echoing from the depths of the fjord. The knock-in is a potent symbol of the dual nature of beauty and the perils of romantic delusion. It represents the profound truth that what is most alluring is often most dangerous. The creature's enchanted music is a metaphor for any powerful, intoxicating force, be it art, love, or ambition, that can lead one to abandon reason and caution. Alara's tragic fate is a cautionary tale about the dangers of projecting one's own desires onto the world, of seeing what one wants to see rather than what is actually there. She was not lured by a monster so much as by her own unfulfilled yearnings. The knock-in simply provided the beautiful, empty vessel into which she poured her dreams. The legend also speaks to humanity's relationship with the natural world. It reminds us that nature is not a passive backdrop for human dramas. It is a powerful, active force with its own mysterious and often indifferent will. The placid surface of the lake, like the knock-in's handsome disguise, invites us in, but beneath lies a realm that is alien, powerful, and utterly unforgiving of our romantic notions. In our contemporary world, the knock-in song has taken on new forms. The enchanted melody that bypasses reason can be seen in the seductive pull of digital worlds and virtual realities, which offer a beautiful escape from the complexities of real life, yet can trap us in a lonely, disembodied existence. It is the curated perfection of social media, a shimmering surface that conceals depths of anxiety and artifice. It is the siren call of ideologies that promise simple answers to complex problems, luring us away from critical thought and into the drowning depths of dogmatism. The knock-in warns us to always look beneath the surface, to question that which seems too perfect, and to be wary of any beauty that demands we abandon our judgment. It teaches that true connection is not found in a mesmerizing fantasy, but in the grounded, often difficult reality of the world we share. The knock-in, therefore, is not merely a water spirit, but a guardian of the boundary between illusion and reality. It is a permanent reminder that the most beautiful surfaces can hide the most dangerous depths, and that the sweetest songs are often sung to lure us to our doom. It challenges us to listen not only with our hearts, but with our minds, lest we too be pulled beneath the waves by a melody of our own making. We now leave the elemental spirits of the wild and turn our gaze to a creation of a different sort, one born not of nature, but of human hands and human desperation. Our path leads us to the heart of old Europe, to the winding cobblestone streets of the Jewish ghetto in 16th century Prague. Here, amidst an atmosphere of persecution and fear, a legend was forged that speaks to the awesome and terrifying power of creation, the burden of protection, and the ever-present danger of a tool becoming a tyrant. We shall examine the story of the Golem of Prague. This entity is not a spirit or a demon, but an automaton of clay, animated by sacred magic for a single purpose: to defend the Jewish people from their enemies. Its motivation is not its own. It is the will of its creator, a righteous mission that, through the fallibility of its human masters, would spiral into uncontrollable chaos. The golem is described as a massive, powerful humanoid figure sculpted from the clay of the Vltava riverbed. Its form was crude and imposing, lacking the fine details of a human being, its face often depicted as a blank, featureless mask. Its skin was the color of dried earth, and its movements were said to be stiff and mechanical, yet possessed of an unstoppable, brutish force. It was in essence a walking statue, an effigy of a man given a terrifying semblance of life. Its power was rooted in its physical invincibility and tireless strength. It was impervious to weapons, felt no pain, and required no rest. Its most significant supernatural attribute, however, was the method of its animation. A piece of parchment inscribed with one of the sacred names of God, a shem, was placed in its mouth or inscribed on its forehead. This divine word was the source of its life, the engine of its power. The golem was also said to possess the ability to become invisible and to summon spirits from the dead, though these are later embellishments to the core legend. Its primary weakness was its absolute dependence on the shem. Without it, the golem was nothing more than a lifeless statue of clay. Furthermore, it was a being of pure action without conscience or discernment, capable only of following instructions literally, a flaw that would prove to be its ultimate undoing. The golem's origin is a story of faith, fear, and mystical power. The most famous version of the legend attributes its creation to the great 16th century scholar and mystic, Rabbi Judah Loeb ben Bezalel. During a time of intense anti-Semitic persecution, when the Jewish community of Prague was falsely accused of the ritual murder of Christian children, the infamous blood libel, Rabbi Loeb, guided by a vision in a dream, sought to create a protector. He went down to the banks of the river with 2 of his disciples, and together they performed a sacred ritual, using the 4 elements, earth, water, fire, and air, to sculpt and animate the clay figure. By chanting sacred Hebrew incantations and, finally, inserting the shem, they breathed an artificial life into the inert form. The golem was born not of malice, but of a desperate need for justice and protection in a hostile world. It was a tangible manifestation of a community's will to survive. The golem, under the command of Rabbi Loeb, became the tireless guardian of the Prague ghetto. It patrolled the streets at night, an immense, silent sentinel against those who would do the community harm. It was said to have exposed false accusations and thwarted pogroms, its sheer strength and terrifying appearance a deterrent to would-be attackers. For a time, it was a perfect servant, a miraculous salvation. However, the rabbi soon discovered the immense burden of his creation. The golem had to be deactivated every Sabbath, the day of rest, by removing the shem. One Friday evening, Rabbi Loeb became so engrossed in his preparations for the Sabbath that he forgot to remove the parchment from the golem's mouth. The creature, imbued with sacred life but with no sacred purpose on the holy day, went berserk. It was a force of pure, untethered power, a sacred instrument now playing a profane and destructive tune. It rampaged through the ghetto, its immense strength, once a tool of protection, now a source of terror for the very people it was meant to defend. It smashed market stalls, tore buildings, and threatened to destroy everything in its path. In a panic, Rabbi Loeb rushed from the synagogue and confronted his creation. He managed to reach up and pull the shem from the golem's mouth. Instantly, the creature's immense power vanished. It froze, then crumbled into a lifeless pile of dust and clay right there in the street. The rabbi, realizing the profound danger of wielding such power, resolved never to create another. The remains of the golem were said to have been gathered and stored in the attic of the old New Synagogue in Prague, where, according to legend, they lie to this day, waiting to be reawakened in a time of greatest need. The Golem of Prague is one of the most resonant and enduring legends in Western folklore, a powerful allegory with multiple layers of meaning. At its core, it is a profound meditation on the relationship between creator and creation and a cautionary tale about the dangers of hubris. Rabbi Loeb, though acting with righteous intent, usurped a power reserved for the divine, the creation of life. The golem's eventual rampage serves as a stark reminder that human creations, no matter how well-intentioned, can develop unforeseen and uncontrollable consequences. It is the archetypal story of technology turning against its master, a theme that resonates from Mary Shelley's Frankenstein to modern anxieties about artificial intelligence. The golem symbolizes the unthinking, amoral nature of raw power. It has strength, but no wisdom, obedience, but no understanding. Its literal interpretation of commands highlights the critical gap between instruction and true judgment, a warning that power without discernment is merely a more efficient form of destruction. The legend's modern relevance is both immediate and profound. In an age defined by technological acceleration, the golem serves as the quintessential metaphor for any powerful tool we create but do not fully understand or control. It is the nuclear weapon, created for defense, but holding the power of global annihilation. It is the autonomous drone, a protector that lacks moral calculus. It is the algorithm that shapes our social and political reality, a servant that, through its unthinking and literal execution of its code, can amplify division and misinformation, turning the tool of connection into an engine of chaos. The forgotten Sabbath ritual is a potent symbol of our own modern oversight. In our relentless pursuit of progress and power, we too often forget the moments of rest, reflection, and ethical consideration necessary to keep our creations in check. We forget to remove the shem. The golem legend forces us to ask critical questions. Just because we can create something, does that mean we should? And who is ultimately responsible when our protectors become our destroyers? Ultimately, the Golem of Prague is a story not of a monster of clay, but of the monster of unintended consequences. It is a timeless warning, etched in the cobblestones of an ancient city, that the greatest power we can wield is not the power to create, but the wisdom to show restraint. The pile of dust in the synagogue attic is a monument to the fragile line between salvation and self-destruction, a line that humanity walks with every new invention it brings into the world. We journey now from the constructed guardian of Prague to a specter born of inconsolable grief and unending penance. We cross the Atlantic once more to the moonlit riverbanks and shadowed canals of Mexico and the broader landscape of Latin America. Here, a mournful cry is said to drift on the night air, a sound of such profound sorrow and despair that it chills the blood and warns all who hear it to seek shelter. It is the cry of La Llorona, the weeping woman. She is one of the most iconic figures in Hispanic folklore, a restless spirit trapped between the living and the dead. Her motivation is a tormenting cocktail of grief, guilt, and a desperate, eternal search for that which she has lost, a search that has twisted her sorrow into a dangerous and predatory curse. La Llorona's appearance is that of a classic phantom, though with distinct and terrifying features. She is most often seen as a tall, slender woman, cloaked in a flowing white burial gown that seems to drift rather than walk over the ground. Her face is usually obscured by a veil or by her long, black, disheveled hair, but those who claim to have seen it describe a visage of either haunting, ethereal beauty or a horrifying, skeletal mask of anguish. Her most defining characteristic, however, is not visual but auditory, her soul-shattering wail. It is a cry, "I miss Helios! Oh, my children!" that carries all the pain of a mother's ultimate loss. The sound itself is a supernatural weapon. It is said to be faint when she is near and loud when she is far away, a disorienting tactic that lures the curious or freezes the terrified in place. Her powers are those of a classic specter. She can glide through solid objects, manipulate the environment to create chilling mists and sudden gusts of wind, and induce a state of profound terror in mortals. Her curse is primarily directed at children, whom she is said to abduct near bodies of water, mistaking them in her madness for her own lost sons. Her weakness is her own eternal torment. She is not a being of pure malice, but a prisoner of her own grief, forever bound to the scene of her crime, unable to find peace or move on. The origin story of La Llorona, while varying in its details from region to region, follows a consistent and tragic narrative. The most common version tells of a woman of startling beauty named Maria. In her village, she was admired by all, but she fell in love with a wealthy and handsome nobleman who passed through her town. He was charmed by her, and for a time, they were happy, and she bore him 2 sons. He lavished her with attention and gifts, but being of a higher social class, he refused to marry her. His passions eventually cooled, and his visits became less frequent. One day, he returned to the village with a new bride, a lady of his own standing, and told Maria that he was leaving her to be with his new wife, though he would take their sons to be raised in his new home. Consumed by a storm of jealous rage and desperate grief, Maria's mind snapped. In a fit of madness, she took her 2 young sons down to the river and, to spite their father, she drowned them. It was only when the small bodies were carried away by the current that the horror of her actions crashed down upon her. She was consumed by a guilt so absolute that she ran along the riverbank, screaming for her children, until she collapsed and died of sorrow. However, because of her terrible sin, she was denied entry into the afterlife. She was condemned to wander the earth as a spirit, eternally searching the waterways for her drowned sons, her beautiful face now a mask of eternal weeping. Let's imagine a small, dusty village in rural Mexico in the late 19th century. 2 young brothers, Mateo and Joaquin, were known for their mischievous spirits, often disobeying their parents to play by the cool waters of the nearby river late into the evening. Their mother had warned them countless times about the dangers of the river after dark, telling them the story of La Llorona to frighten them into obedience. But to the boys, it was just another of the old folk tales, a story for scaring babies. One warm summer night, chasing fireflies, they wandered farther down the riverbank than ever before. The moon was full, casting a silver path on the dark, slow-moving water. Suddenly, a strange chill fell over the air. The chirping of the crickets ceased, and then they heard it, a faint, mournful cry that seemed to come from far away. Curious and unafraid, they moved toward the sound. As they rounded a bend in the river, they saw her. A tall woman in a white dress stood in the shallows, her back to them, her shoulders shaking with sobs. The cry was louder now, a sound of pure agony that made the boy's skin crawl. Joaquin, the younger, felt a primal fear and pulled on his brother's arm, begging to go home. But Mateo, bolder and more foolish, called out, asking the woman if she was all right. At the sound of his voice, she stopped crying and slowly turned. The face they saw was not human. It was a skull, its empty sockets weeping black tears. She raised a skeletal hand and pointed a long, bony finger at them, her silent mouth opening in a soundless scream. A terrible, spectral wail erupted, no longer distant but right beside them, and the boys turned and fled in blind panic. They did not stop running until they burst through the door of their small home, babbling incoherently about the weeping ghost in the river. They were never again seen near the water after sundown. The physical evidence of their encounter was slight but telling. A single, long strand of black hair, unnaturally cold to the touch, was found snagged on a thorn bush where they had seen the apparition, and for weeks the family's dogs would not go near the river, whining and cowering at the door. La Llorona is a profoundly complex figure, a sociological and psychological artifact of immense significance. She is at once a villain and a victim, a monster and a figure of profound pathos. Her legend functions on one level as a cautionary tale for children, a bogeyman figure used to enforce obedience and keep them away from the real-world dangers of rivers and canals. On a deeper level, however, her story is a dark exploration of the societal pressures placed upon women, particularly within the patriarchal and colonial structures of the New World. Maria is a woman betrayed by a man of a higher social class, a man who uses her and then discards her and her children when they become inconvenient. Her horrific act is born of powerlessness. It is the tragic, insane lashing out of a woman who has been stripped of her agency, her honor, and her future. Her eternal punishment, to wander and weep, reflects a cultural anxiety surrounding female passion, mental illness, and the transgression of maternal ideals. She is the bad mother archetype condemned for eternity. The modern resonance of La Llorona is multifaceted. She endures as a powerful symbol of grief and loss, her cry giving voice to a sorrow that is too deep for words. In a more political context, she has been reinterpreted by some feminist and Chicana scholars as a symbol of resistance. She is the indigenous woman betrayed by the Spanish conquistador, her drowned children representing a lost culture. Her wail is not just one of personal grief, but of historical trauma, a cry for the injustices inflicted upon her people. Her story continues to be a potent vehicle for exploring themes of gender, class, colonization, and the enduring pain of history. She reminds us that the past is never truly past, and that its unresolved griefs continue to haunt the present landscape, crying out for acknowledgement and justice. She is the ghost of a historical wound that has never healed. In the end, La Llorona is more than just a frightening specter. She is a vessel for collective sorrow, a wandering monument to the devastating consequences of betrayal and the eternal agony of loss. Her cry on the night wind is a lament not only for her own children, but for all that has been lost to power, pride, and the cruelties of a heartless world. It is a warning that some griefs are so profound they can never be laid to rest. Our journey now takes us to the windswept coasts and lonely roads of the British Isles, specifically to the marshy, desolate landscapes of East Anglia. Here, amidst the fog that rolls in from the North Sea, stalks a creature of pure dread, a harbinger whose appearance is an omen of imminent doom. This is not a spirit with a complex psychological motivation, but a raw, elemental force of terror. We speak of the Black Shuck. This colossal, spectral hound is one of Britain's most famous and feared apparitions. Its motivation is enigmatic. It does not seem to kill or attack out of hunger or malice, but rather its very presence is a portent, a supernatural sign that death is about to visit the community or the individual who witnesses it. It is the personification of the terror of the unknown, a silent, implacable messenger of mortality. The Black Shuck is consistently described as a dog of immense size, often as large as a calf or a small horse. Its fur is shaggy and jet black, and its most terrifying and frequently reported feature is its single, blazing eye, set in the center of its forehead, glowing with a malevolent, fiery light, sometimes red, sometimes green. It moves with a terrifying silence, its massive paws making no sound upon the ground, and it is often accompanied by a sulfurous odor and a palpable sense of dread. Its supernatural abilities are primarily atmospheric and prophetic. It can appear and disappear at will, pass through solid objects, and its howl is said to curdle the blood. Its most dreadful power is its role as an omen. To see the Black Shuck is to be marked for death. If not the witness themselves, then a member of their family will die within a year. In some legends, a direct gaze into its fiery eye brings instant death. Its weakness is unclear, as it is not a creature to be fought, but an omen to be survived. Some tales suggest that it cannot cross running water, a common trait for supernatural entities in European folklore, symbolizing a barrier between the natural and the otherworldly. The origins of the Black Shuck are ancient and deeply rooted in the mythology of the region. The name Shuck is thought to derive from the Old English word skucka, meaning demon or devil, linking the creature to pre-Christian beliefs. It is likely a folk memory of the hounds associated with the Norse god Odin and the Wild Hunt, a spectral procession of huntsmen and hounds that tore across the winter sky, a sight that also foretold death and disaster. The bleak, low-lying, and often foggy landscape of East Anglia, with its lonely coastal paths and dark fens, provided the perfect psychological breeding ground for a legend of a spectral predator. The Black Shuck is a spirit of the landscape, a manifestation of the fear and isolation felt by the small communities living in this stark and often unforgiving environment. It is a demon born of fog and fear. One of the most famous and well-documented accounts of the Black Shuck's appearance occurred on the 4th of August, 1577. A terrifying and violent thunderstorm broke over the county of Suffolk. In the village of Bungay, the congregation was gathered for morning prayer in St. Mary's Church. As the storm raged outside, the sky grew unnaturally dark. Suddenly, the church doors flew open with a crash of thunder, and a great black dog, its eye blazing like a coal, rushed into the church. It ran down the aisle amidst the terrified congregation, wringing the necks of a man and a boy, causing them to fall down dead. It then caused the church steeple to collapse before running to the nearby church in Blithburg, some 12 miles away. There, it wrought similar havoc, killing 2 more people and leaving immense, scorched claw marks on the north door of the church as it departed. The account of this terrifying event was recorded at the time by the Puritan clergyman Abraham Fleming in a pamphlet titled, A Strange and Terrible Wonder. The claw marks on the Blithburg church door can still be seen to this day, a physical scar left on the world by a supernatural terror, a lasting piece of evidence that has fueled the legend for over 400 years. The black shuck serves as a powerful symbol of mortality and the primal fear of sudden, inexplicable death. In a pre-scientific world, where life was often precarious and disasters like plagues, famines, and violent storms could strike without warning, the shuck provided a supernatural framework for understanding and anticipating tragedy. It was a personification of the community's ambient anxiety. Seeing the hound was not the cause of death, but rather a confirmation that the unseen forces of fate had already marked someone for their end. It is the shape that nameless dread takes on a dark and lonely road. The creature's silence and its single, fiery eye contribute to its horror. It is an unblinking, uncommunicative observer, a representative of a cosmic order that is indifferent to human pleas. It does not speak, it does not bargain. It simply appears, and death follows. It is the ultimate memento mori, a walking reminder that death is always silently padding along at our heels. In the modern era, the black shuck continues to haunt the imagination, with sightings still reported in the lonely lanes of East Anglia. Its symbolic meaning, however, has evolved. It can be interpreted as a metaphor for any impending doom that we feel powerless to stop, be it a personal health crisis, a collective social breakdown, or an ecological catastrophe. The shuck is the feeling one gets when reading a dire scientific report on climate change. The sense of a vast, unstoppable force that has been set in motion, a doom that is already running silently towards us through the darkness. Its fiery eye is the unblinking stare of a future we have been warned about but feel unable to avert. The legend also speaks to the power of place and the persistence of local folklore in an increasingly globalized and homogenized world. The black shuck belongs to East Anglia. It is a product of its specific landscape and history, a testament to the idea that some stories are so deeply embedded in the soil that they can never be fully erased. The black shuck, then, is more than a ghost story. It is a raw, primal expression of our relationship with death and fate. It is the shadow that falls just before the final darkness, a terrifying messenger from a silent, watchful universe. It reminds us that on the loneliest roads, under the darkest skies, we are never truly alone, and that some ancient fears will forever walk the earth beside us. We now return to the cold, northern climes of Scandinavia, but we leave the waters of the Naken for the burial mounds and forgotten tombs of the Viking Age. Here we confront a creature that embodies the terrifying idea that the dead do not always rest in peace. This is not a drifting, ethereal ghost, but a corporeal and malevolent entity of tremendous physical power, the Draugr. The Draugr is an animated corpse, a formidable undead warrior that jealously guards its tomb and the treasures buried within it. Its motivation is a venomous combination of greed, envy, and a spiteful hatred for the living. It is the personification of the past's refusal to die, a monstrous embodiment of a legacy so powerful and possessive that it clings to the world with a cold, dead grip. The appearance of a Draugr is gruesome and imposing. It is not a rotting, shambling corpse like a modern zombie. Instead, its body is preserved and often swollen to a great size, possessing a supernatural weight and density. Its skin is described as either deathly pale, corpse pale, or a horrifying black or blue, death blue. Its eyes often glow with a malevolent, phosphorescent light, and the stench of the grave surrounds it. A Draugr retains a semblance of the intelligence and personality it had in life, but twisted into a purely malevolent form. Its powers are manifold and terrifying. It possesses immense physical strength, far exceeding that of a living man, capable of crushing bone and tearing through wood and stone. Draugr are also shapeshifters, able to take the form of animals, most commonly a bull or a cat, or to swell in size to monstrous proportions. They can control the weather, plunging the landscape into darkness and storms, and they have the ability to swim through solid earth and stone as if it were water, rising from their graves at will. A Draugr's very presence can drive mortals and animals mad with fear. Its primary weakness is that it must be utterly destroyed to be stopped. Decapitation is often required, with the head being placed at the creature's buttocks to prevent it from reanimating, followed by the burning of the body and the scattering of the ashes in the sea. The creation of a Draugr is linked to the character of the deceased in life. According to Norse belief, only the most disagreeable, greedy, and power-hungry individuals were likely to become Draugr after death. A powerful warrior or chieftain who was buried with great treasure was especially at risk. Their worldly avarice and will to dominate were so strong that they transcended death, anchoring their spirit to their corpse and their burial mound. The Draugr is, in essence, the ghost of a person's own worst traits, given physical form and supernatural power. They are not victims of a curse, but rather the architects of their own damnation, their afterlife a monstrous extension of their flawed mortal existence. The Icelandic sagas are replete with tales of heroes confronting these tomb dwellers. One of the most famous is the story of Grettir the Strong and his battle with the Draugr the Old. Grettir, a famous outlaw and hero, heard tales of a haunted burial mound on the island of Haramarsi, where a Viking named Kar lay buried with his treasure. The mound was cursed, and Kar's Draugr rose each night to terrorize the local farms, killing livestock and driving the inhabitants mad with fear. Grettir, ever bold, decided to break into the tomb and face the monster. He dug his way in the mound and found a great chamber where Kar sat on a throne, surrounded by immense wealth. As Grettir began to gather the treasure, the Draugr rose, and a terrible wrestling match began. The saga describes a battle of epic proportions, the two grappling in the darkness of the tomb, smashing against the walls and treasure chests. Grettir, though the strongest of men, found the Draugr's strength to be overwhelming. Finally, just as his strength was failing, Grettir managed to maneuver the creature to the entrance of the tomb, where it was struck by a ray of moonlight. In that moment, the Draugr's power faltered, and with a final, desperate effort, Grettir drew his sword, swung it with all his might, and severed the creature's head. He then, as was the custom, placed the head between the Draugr's thighs to ensure it would not rise again. He took the treasure, but the dying Draugr laid a curse upon him, foretelling that Grettir would grow weaker and more fearful with age, and would ultimately die alone in the dark. This curse would follow Grettir for the rest of his life, a chilling reminder that even in victory, a confrontation with the unquiet dead leaves a permanent scar. The Draugr is a complex symbol of the dangerous power of the past. It represents the idea that history and the powerful figures who shape it do not simply fade away. Their influence, their greed, and their unresolved conflicts can linger, poisoning the present. The Draugr guarding its hoard is a perfect metaphor for any toxic legacy, be it a family's dark secret, a nation's unacknowledged historical crime, or a destructive ideology that refuses to be buried and continues to terrorize future generations. Grettir's battle is the struggle of the present to overcome and break free from the oppressive weight of a malignant past. The curse laid upon him, even in victory, is a profound psychological truth. Engaging with such deep-seated trauma and history always leaves a mark on the victor. You cannot confront the darkness without carrying a piece of it with you afterward. In a modern context, The Draugr can be seen as the embodiment of outdated but powerful institutions that refuse to change or die. It is the zombie corporation, mindlessly pursuing profit long after its social utility has expired. It is the political dynasty clinging to power through generations, its dead grip stifling progress. It is the persistence of old hatreds and prejudices that we believe we have buried, only to have them rise from their graves in times of social stress. The act of decapitating the Draugr and placing its head at its thighs is a symbolic act of finality and closure. It represents the difficult and often brutal work required to truly put the past to rest, to ensure that its toxic patterns do not reanimate and continue to haunt the living. The legend of the Draugr is therefore a grim and powerful lesson. It teaches that the dead are only truly dead when we have fully reckoned with their legacy. It warns that some wills are too strong, some treasures too tempting, and some histories too terrible to stay buried on their own. The past, it tells us, is not a peaceful graveyard. It is a haunted mound, and its guardians are jealous, strong, and ever watchful. For our final legend, we venture to a place where the tropical heat and deep-seated folklore give rise to a creature of visceral and shocking horror. Our journey takes us to the Philippines, an archipelago with a rich and complex tapestry of myth. Here, in the deep of the night, a terror takes flight that embodies duality, betrayal, and the monstrosity that can hide within the most familiar of forms. We confront the Manananggal. This being is a type of vampiric witch, whose name is derived from the Tagalog word for to separate. Its defining and most terrifying characteristic is its ability to sever its own upper torso from its lower body. Its motivation is a thirst for the blood and, most horrifyingly, the hearts of unborn fetuses, making it a specific terror to pregnant women and a symbol of corrupted femininity and maternal instinct. The Manananggal's appearance is a study in grotesque transformation. By day, it appears as an ordinary, often beautiful and reclusive, human woman. She is an unassuming neighbor, a quiet villager. But as night falls, a horrific metamorphosis occurs. The woman will retreat to a secluded spot, rub a special oil on her body, and sprout large, leathery, bat-like wings from her back. Then, in an act of supreme body horror, her torso will violently detach from her waist down, leaving her legs and lower body standing motionless while her top half takes to the night sky. The flying creature is a nightmare, a winged female torso with long, disheveled hair, wild eyes, and viscera trailing from beneath her severed waist. Her primary supernatural ability is flight, allowing her to hunt over great distances. Her most feared weapon is a long, proboscis-like tongue, which she can extend to an incredible length. She uses this tongue to pierce the roofs of houses and suck the hearts from sleeping fetuses directly from their mother's wombs. She is also said to prey on newlyweds and solitary men. Her weaknesses are stark and specific. The creature cannot abide salt, garlic, or the tail of a stingray, which can be used as a whip. Her most critical vulnerability is her abandoned lower half. If one can find the stationary legs and lower torso, sprinkling salt or crushed garlic on the exposed flesh will prevent the upper half from reattaching. If the Manananggal cannot rejoin its body by sunrise, the rising sun will disintegrate it, destroying it forever. The origin of the Manananggal is steeped in the animistic and shamanistic traditions of pre-colonial Philippines. It represents a darkened version of the powerful female spiritual leader, the Babaylan, where the Babaylan was a healer and a conduit to the spirit world for the good of the community. The Manananggal is a creature of selfish, destructive power. The legend likely evolved and intensified during the Spanish colonial period, where local folklore was often demonized and recast through the lens of Christian concepts of witchcraft and demonic evil. The creature's specific targeting of fetuses and pregnant women taps into a universal and primal fear surrounding the vulnerability of childbirth and the anxieties of protecting the next generation. It is a monster born from the nexus of ancient belief, colonial suppression, and deep-seated human fears. Consider a small, rural barrio in the 20th century, nestled among rice paddies and dense jungle. A young couple, Elena and Ramon, were expecting their first child. Living next to them was an old, solitary woman named Alencina, who was quiet but always seemed to know the village gossip. Elena, in her final months of pregnancy, began to suffer from terrible nightmares. She dreamed of a great, dark bird perched on the roof of their small nipa hut, and she would wake up feeling weak and drained. Ramon, a practical man, dismissed it as the anxieties of a first-time mother. One night, however, he was awoken by a strange, clicking sound on their roof. He looked up and saw, silhouetted against the moon, a horrifying shape. It was a winged creature, and from it descended a long, thin, filament-like tube that was probing at the thatch above where his wife slept. In a flash of cold terror, he remembered the old stories. He grabbed the large bolo knife he kept by the door and a pouch of rock salt from the kitchen. He crept outside and saw the creature, a winged female torso, its intestines dangling, latched onto his roof. At the same time, he heard a sound from Alencina's nearby hut. Peeking through her window, he saw a sight that froze his blood. A pair of human legs and a lower torso, standing motionless in the middle of the room. Without a second thought, Ramon burst into the hut and poured the entire pouch of salt onto the severed, bloody waist of the lower half. A blood-curdling shriek tore through the night from the roof of his own home. The creature outside disengaged and tried to fly back, but as it approached its home, it seemed to recoil as if from a fire. It circled frantically, wailing in rage and panic as the eastern sky began to lighten. As the first rays of the sun struck its form, the man-in-angle ignited in a flash of black smoke and foul-smelling ash, destroyed forever. The standing lower half collapsed into a pile of dust. The village was safe, but the memory of that night, of the monster who had lived so placidly beside them, would haunt Ramon and Elena for the rest of their lives. The man-in-angle is a rich and disturbing symbol of duality and the fear of the hidden monster within the community. The creature's ability to split itself in two is a graphic metaphor for a fractured identity, the division between the public self and the secret, monstrous self. By day, she is a member of the community. By night, she is its predator. This speaks to a deep-seated social anxiety, the fear that our neighbors, those we trust, may harbor a dark and destructive nature. It is the ultimate betrayal of community trust. Furthermore, the legend is a powerful, if grotesque, exploration of female power and its corruption. The man-in-angle is a perversion of the life-giving, maternal archetype. Instead of nurturing life, she consumes it at its most vulnerable stage. This can be interpreted as a manifestation of societal fears surrounding female sexuality, agency, and power that exists outside the prescribed roles of wife and mother. In the contemporary world, the man-in-angle remains a staple of Filipino horror and a potent cultural symbol. It represents the anxieties of a society grappling with its own dualities, the tension between tradition and modernity, between indigenous belief and colonial religion, between a communal, rural past and an individualistic, urban present. The image of the creature, severed from its lower half, can be seen as a metaphor for a sense of rootlessness or alienation, of being disconnected from one's own foundation and history. The search for the abandoned lower half is the search for the fatal flaw, the vulnerable origin point of the evil that plagues us. It teaches that to defeat the monster that flies in the darkness, one must confront the part of it that remains grounded in the familiar light of day. The man-in-angle is a truly terrifying creation of the human imagination, a creature of profound psychological and social horror. It is a warning to look beyond the placid surface of everyday life, for it is there, in the quiet neighbor and the unassuming friend, that the most shocking monstrosities can sometimes take root. It is a testament to the fear that the greatest danger comes not from a remote monster, but from the darkness that lives and splits right alongside us. Our long and shadowed journey now draws to its close. We have stood in the frozen silence of the Wendigo's forest, listened to the Knockin's fatal melody by the dark water's edge, and felt the earth tremble beneath the tread of the golem. We have heard the unending grief in La Llorona's cry, seen the flash of the black shuck's deadly eye, grappled with the unyielding past in the form of the Draugr, and witnessed the horrific schism of the Mananangel. Each entity, a unique crystallization of a culture's deepest fears, has offered us a glimpse into the abyss. What wisdom, then, have we gleaned from these collective nightmares? What truth connects the starving spirit of the north to the grieving phantom of the south, the man of clay to the woman of air? Each legend, in its own terrifying dialect, speaks a common language. They tell us that our world is governed by laws far older than our own, laws of balance, taboo, and consequence. They warn that greed, whether for flesh or for gold, inevitably creates a void that can never be filled. They teach that beauty can be a lethal trap, and that our own desires can sing the siren song of our destruction. They caution that the power we create can turn on us, that grief can become a monster, and that the past, if not properly laid to rest, will always rise again to haunt the living. Across these 7 tales, a single, overarching thesis emerges. These beings are not merely antagonists, they are regulators. They are the immune system of the moral and natural world. They rise when a boundary is crossed, when a sacred trust is broken, when human arrogance or desperation upsets a fragile equilibrium. The Wendigo appears when community is forsaken for cannibalistic survival. The golem runs rampant when creation is unmoored from ethical restraint. La Llorona is born from a moment of passionate transgression against the maternal bond. They are the consequences of our actions, given monstrous form and eternal life. They are the terrifying, living embodiment of the adage, as you sow, so shall you reap. By watching, by listening, by seeking to understand these ancient and terrible stories, you do more than entertain a morbid curiosity. You become a participant in a tradition as old as humanity itself. You become a keeper of the warnings, a guardian of the ancestral wisdom encoded in these tales of terror. I urge you, therefore, to continue this communion. Subscribe to our channel so that we may continue to serve as your guide through these darkened lands. Share these stories, for their lessons are more vital now than ever. And leave your thoughts below to enrich our collective understanding of the shadows that shape us. May your nights be filled with productive terrors, and your dreams haunted by truths that strengthen your waking hours. Remember that the best monsters are always the ones that show us something true about ourselves. And as you go forth, be mindful of the whispers on the wind and the shadows that gather at the edge of the firelight, for the world is far older and more mysterious than we often care to admit, and its ancient guardians are ever watchful.